And this is all things. This is all things commercial. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to let pose this first question to Miss Shawneequa Badger, because we're going to go with ladies first. What was it that attracted you to commercial real estate? What is it that draws you to commercial real estate?
So I remember going to a conference many moons ago, pre-COVID. That seems like it's been decades ago. And I remember listening to a gentleman by the name of Ed Milet. And he is the founder of the World Financial Group. They do a number of things financial. And the one thing that he said that resonated with me is small businesses are the consciousness of America. And if we can't stabilize the small businesses, we disrupt the economy and the microeconomies throughout anybody's community. So now if you fast forward to April 2020, where 40% of our Black businesses just poof, went away. A lot of that is because they weren't economically stable. And many times we don't realize how much of a burden leasing and rents can be if they're not done properly. So if we are educated as practitioners, we can then help people enter into the areas of commercial, whether it's leasing, buying, selling, all of those areas that impact our ability to build wealth from a entrepreneurial space. We are absolutely doing a service to our community. So that's what inspired me about really taking a more, what does Steve say, 10 toes down approach to commercial for sure.
Okay. Mr. Peterson, I know you've been doing it for a minute. Explain this, what interests you, what attracted you to the business?
Yeah, for sure. The numbers. Commercial investment property is all about the numbers. So that was what attracted me about the business. I got into business in 2003. And when my first deal was a 6-unit apartment building. And the numbers attracted me because I resonated to math. Since I was a kid, I never really liked school, but I was always good at math. It was something that made sense to me. It was something I saw that was applied in the real world, you know what I mean, on a daily basis. You go to the bank, you go to the store, it's all math, right? Even sports, everything's stats, it's math. So the mathematics of it is what drove me into the business, because it was something that I resonated to and something I related to. Now it's a tough business. It is tougher than residential, and from a lot of different ways, a lot of the same principles apply. But what for me made more sense was that, you could look at a property and break it down based on the numbers. And that really resonated to me. And then when you're talking to other people and you're dealing with other people, communicating those numbers and having conversations based on them, for me was very attractive. And I think even to this day, it's what is driving my passion for that business and my passion for teaching, like my team and everywhere I speak and I teach, because there's an element of the mathematics in every element of the business. Now, also for residential, but truly even more so for commercial. So that's really what got me into the game. And that's really what sparked and piqued my interest and has continued to have my interest into this. And I would say this, you guys, of all the school subjects that there are out there, mathematics really applies to everything. And so as our children are going through, our Oakland children are facing several school closures again, right? And we're having to look here, it's ridiculous. So one thing that we can do as parents, as people, is to teach our children the basics of math. And if you're not good at it, there's all kind of apps and programs out there. But understanding mathematics is key to commercial real estate, but I would say to all business, all real estate. And that's what drove me into it.
Okay. Now you spoke about the differences in between commercial and residential, that there being differences. Are there any major differences within commercial and residential transactions that affect the bottom line for commercial transactions?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of major differences, you know what I mean? And everything within the transaction is going to affect the bottom line one way or another, right? Mm-hmm. the key, we talked about the numbers. The biggest difference in commercial and residential is the approach to value. In residential, the number one approach to value is the market sales approach, right? The comps, the sales comps. In commercial, that is accounted for, but the primary determinant to value is the income approach, right? That's why the numbers are important, the income approach. But also, that's just one thing. Also, the lending, and that's probably the bigger piece that affects your bottom line, because the lending criteria, the process, the valuation is different, and we're looking at more so at what the debt service coverage ratio is of a property than more so the debt to income ratio of a person in residential. Those are two huge things. And then the last thing is disclosure. It's the wild, wild west in commercial. Now, the disclosure requirement that you sell a house, your disclosure file is going to be 4 or 5 times bigger than your disclosure file for a commercial property. While you still have to disclose, and there are important disclosures for commercial, the level of which the disclosure requirements are significantly less in commercial, because everyone is considered, well, everyone is not, but they are considered to be, big boys and girls. They're not consumers. They're either investors or business people. So there is no consumer protection for commercial real estate. Therefore, our disclosures are way less. And so those are 3 things that right there, that are the numbers, the lending, the disclosure, very, very different, that you need to understand. You don't necessarily have to master in order to close a deal, but you need to understand that could affect whether you're going to close or not. And another thing is commercial escrows are typically 60 to 90 days. Versus like a residential 30 to 45 days. So these things are nuances you need to understand going into it. It doesn't mean you can't make money in it, but very important to understand.
Ms. Badger, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that everything that Steve said is on point. It's funny that he brought in the financing part, because we're going to be diving deep into the financing part for the commercial industrial division at National. Really like getting people. So the whole thing is if you think about how scary getting a mortgage is on the residential, how scary do you think it is for the commercial side? And it's actually much easier to get into on the commercial side if you get the math right, if your math is math. And so we have to be able to teach us as practitioners the ABCs of the commercial side, so we can start walking our clients in and having seamless conversations about them participating in the process. We could revitalize our entire East 14th business corridor if we understood what it took to be able to get in, revitalize, and really give a gift to the community, because the math is math. And again, so that's going to be a big component that we're going to walk into the national conference in. I'm really excited about. I'm not going to give away too much information, but I'm really excited about rolling that out through the commercial industrial division for sure.
Okay. We're going to pose this next question to you first, and then Steve, you can jump in right after she's done. All right. So how do you best analyze a property from an investor's eye when we're talking about commercial?
Well, it's interesting because many times again, Steve touched on the point of we go through comps, right? What's the most similar property in a certain radius for us to get an understanding of what the comp is, the value is on that property, right? With commercial, it's very interesting. You can figure out all points of the income and really do some amazing things with your performance. So if it's solvent, the building is solvent. That's more important sometimes than your personal finances to guarantee the property, if in fact you got to personally finance, guarantee it. So making sure that, again, understanding all of the touch points around figuring out how a value of a building, property, all of those things, whether it's how it's going to perform, you really have to understand the moving parts of that building Even if it's down to, hey, we're going to be, using the parking lot for something. You have to be able to understand what the real estate value is of the entire building. So I would say when you go in there and you're starting to look at commercial, you want to look at it from a really, really big lens if you can. The lens still got to make sense, but you do want to look at it from a very big lens where it's not a typical lens. So you have to get out of your residential shoes and walk in your commercial shoes and figure out what are all the touch points that are going to help make the people that are acquiring this property less risky because it's a income producing building.
So I guess I have a follow-up to that. Are we looking at it? So let's say I'm a residential, I'm a buyer, I'm looking for a residential property and I'm looking for a triplex or a fourplex. Would that be a different type of lens, I would say? Would that be a smaller lens, a bigger lens? Would this lens be the same?
Yeah, because so I'll use like a 5-unit with laundry. Guess what? You can use the income from the laundry room as part of your income if you can make sure that you can show the income, right? So you have to understand you're just looking at grossing up the rents on a 2 to 4. If you're looking at another building with other operating income, or whether it's not just the rents, it's all the other nuts and bolts of how that building is producing. So you absolutely positively can get a little bit more creative. I don't like to use the word strategic, but very much so creative in how you make the mathing.
Okay.
Right.
Mr. Peterson, you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like what Shawneequa said, is, you're looking at it from a bigger lens, right? Because you're really dialing into. Now, when you talked about 2 to 4 units versus like a apartment building, is it different? Is it similar? Yes, is the answer. Both it is very similar. The principles are the same, but some of the intricate details are different. So it's both the same and it's both different. Now, also, if you're looking at a property from an investor's angle, it also depends on whether you're buying or whether you're selling. Okay. The information also is the same, but you have a different lens in which you're looking at it. Right. So here's what I mean by that. If we're a buyer, we're going to be a little bit more analytical. We're going to be a little bit more skeptical about what we're looking at. Okay. And the things that we want to look at when we're looking as buyers or buyers agents into properties, whether they're 2 to 4 units or whether they're 5+ units or whether it's an office building, whatever, we want to see the rent roll. The rent roll is going to show the list of tenants, what they pay, what their deposit is, when they moved in, when they moved out, all of that. Very detailed rent roll is also going to show who's current, who's behind. A lot of people ain't going to show you that on their rent roll though. There's ways to manipulate that in their reports, but you need to get a rent roll, and that don't change whether it's 2 to 4 units or whether it's 5+. That's the same thing. So we need to analyze who's living there, how much they're paying, what are the deposits, when did they move in and move out. Okay, very, very important. And then what you do is you're looking at the income and expense statement, and you need to be looking at something from the history in the last 2 to 3 years. Right. And so you're pressing for that information as the buyer agent. You're not so much. Now, this is when it's a little bit different when it's 5+ and 2 to 4 units, because again, why is that? We're estimating, we're understanding value. And once you go 5+, it's all about the income. 2 to 4 unit, it is about the income, but it's more so about the comps. So now when you press to get that profit and loss statement, you need to dial in to figure out what is the net operating income of that property. Right? What is the NOI, the net operating income? You analyze all the rents, like Shawneequa said, there's rents from the property, but there can also be laundry income. There can also be cable income. There can also be billboard income, other sources of income. And in relationship to all the expenses, the operating expenses, not the debt, not the mortgage payment, the cost of doing business, the net of that is your net operating income. Very, very important number for both 2 to 4 units, 1 to 4 units rental property, and 5+ units. However, the difference is now we need to apply that cap rate, and that cap rate is more important to the 5+ unit world. The capitalization rate, when you hear me say cap rate, that's the measure of return an investment property generates on an annual basis. based on the income, the net income to a property, and not considering the debt. So now as an investor, you're pressing more and you're looking at what's real, and then you're building your pro forma, your projection for the future. And you're going to be a little bit more analytical than the seller. As a seller, and an investor who is saying, hey, I'm going to sell my property, and now they're going to be a little bit more ambitious on those numbers, because they're going to say, hey, here's my actual numbers, but you can get the rents up over here, you can get the laundry up over here, you can get this expense down. And so as brokers playing both sides, you need to know which side of the lens that you're working on. And because the slightest number movement, $4,000 here, $1,000 here, can affect the value dramatically. So the key to sum all of that up is knowing which side of the coin you own, and then diving deep into what's actual, the rent roll, the profit and loss statement, and understanding the real net operating income. And then building, if you're a buyer, building your projection moving forward. If you're the seller or seller's agent, building your case for why your building is the best building on the block.
Okay. We have a question. Is the rent roll different from a TEC?
You say, is the rent roll different from what's the last part?
TEC.
The TC?
The tenant estoppel certificate.
Tenant estoppels. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so the tenant estoppel is essentially a document that certifies the lease. So yes, the rent roll is different from the tenant estoppel. Now, the tenant estoppels should coincide with the rent roll. The rent roll is the list the landlord gives you, the broker gives you, saying, hey, here's what our tenants are paying. When you get the tenant estoppels, or you obtain those tenant estoppels, those numbers should match up. The whole reason we do tenant estoppels, because sometimes people don't tell you the truth, right? And so the estoppel is making sure that what the tenant says lines up with the lease, and that all should line up with the rent roll. And if it don't, you can come in there and say, well, what's going on? You know, something right here, we might need to get a little discount off of this, or that might change the whole economics of the deal. So it's a great question. Two different things, tenant estoppels and rent rolls, but the estoppels should certify the leases, certify the numbers that match up with the rent roll. You feel me?
I do feel you. Is the rent roll required? Like, the reason I'm asking is because I got my first commercial client. I never did a 6-unit building before. And we asked for the rent roll, and they were like, oh, we don't have a rent roll. All they just gave me was these 6 tenant estoppel certificates. That's why I asked.
Okay. Well, well, here's the deal. They're lazy as shit. Excuse me. They being lazy, and that's dumb. But it's not required. So this is the different thing about commercial. It ain't required. You know what I mean? It's just stupid, because now they gave you the estoppels, right? So you could actually make your own rent roll off of that estoppel. All you do, get a spreadsheet, this tenant paying this much. Now that's dumb, because when you're selling a property, right, you want to make it the highest value as possible. You want to deliver the rent roll. You want to deliver the package, because now you're selling the value, right? So now you can take what they're giving you and saying, okay, well, I'm going to create my own rent roll here based on this information. And as you're negotiating, each little falter and each little cat move that they make, meaning that they're not on their toes, you can utilize that to negotiate for what you want.
Yeah, I think it's just disclosure at the end of the day, because you want to make sure that it keeps the deal very honest when you get it from the tenant and you get it from the seller. And I say that because I know that there's a saying in our industry that says buyers are liars, but guess what? Sellers are too. And you want to make sure that all of the deposits are going to transfer over accordingly, because sometimes the deposits aren't being held in any space other than a checking account. Sometimes those deposits have been spent. You want to be able to understand, like, you know, all of the moving parts of the financials of the building. You want to be able to know outside of, you know, what the operating expenses are. You want to know, like, what your liability is to the tenants, especially in the city of Oakland or anywhere where there's excessive rent control or tenant protection. So you want to make sure that the deal stays very honest. And Steve is right. if something starts looking a little bit fishy on those numbers, it gives you leverage to be able to negotiate on the behalf of your buyer if you're walking in. So you better have those numbers right if you're going to list it. So I gotta say.
Gotcha. Okay. And I just got one more question, just because we're talking about this. I'm glad you
Right
guys
ahead.
had this topic because this is helping me. I'm looking at this P&L for this 6-unit building, and there's automobile income, and I'm like, why would a building have automobile income? Like, what the heck
Right.
is that?
Now, what that is that's a great point. Now, what landlords do, owners do, which you all can do, we all can do if we have rental property. So they're probably showing you the real numbers that they send to their tax man, because what we all can do is we can expense auto and travel as part of our landlord business. And so when you're seeing that alone, that is the cost of automobiles for probably for their life that they jumbled in to their building's profit and loss statement, because they're trying to pay as little as possible on their taxes.
Gotcha. All right,
Now,
cool.
now that could be also like on a bigger, you said 6 units, so probably not, but on a bigger building where, okay, they're driving materials back and forth, that could be a little bit of that as well. But on a 6-unit building, that's somebody's personal auto expense that they're able to, because they own a business, they got a property, and they can expense that out on their P&Ls. When you're running your numbers though, when you see something like that, you extrapolate that out, because that's not what your client is going to, the building, they're not paying whatever it is a month or year on auto expenses. That's not the building's economics. So when you run your numbers, you can extrapolate that out, take that out. Again, these people are lazy who's selling this building to you, nothing against them. But when you're selling it, that is taking away from the NOI. Now you can just look at it and say, hey, I'm looking at the NOI you gave me, and this, it's not justifying your price, so therefore we're going to come in, blah, blah, blah. But what I'm telling you is that's not part of the economics of the building. You can extrapolate that out for purposes of analysis.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Bet.
We have a quick question from Miss Latasha Perry. Go ahead, ask your question, man.
So when Alam just brought up vehicle, I just thought about something. You guys mentioned that you can utilize laundry for income. Can you use parking? So I know a lot of landlords, they charge for parking spots. Can you use parking as well for additional income?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Anything, it's a category called other income that is a part of the analysis equation, and it's literally any other income other than rental that you can generate from a building. Parking, laundry, billboard, vending, you know what I mean? Some people doing Amazon lockers and charging for that, you know what I mean? Whatever you can get money from, it's just called other income. You're gonna start seeing bootleg cannabis clubs out the side, and they're gonna put that down as other income. I don't know about that, but anything that is other income other than rental, that it can be categorized on the profit and loss statement. And that's important because that goes straight to your bottom line.
Well, guess what? We have, some properties in the Bay Area where you have a mixed use space, right? You have the bodega on the bottom floor and the family lives on the top floor, right? Or the family and other tenants live on the top floor. So if the family owns the business, you definitely could use that to the benefit of your numbers for sure.
Okay. Very next question, Ms. Badger, since you was the last person spoke, we will go directly to you with this one. What is the number one concern of commercial transactions, and how does that affect negotiations?
The number one concern. So are you saying like the number one concern is it? Help me out with that. Is the number one concern about the deal itself, or just in general?
About the deal in itself. About the deal in itself, yeah.
Usually my number one concern is making sure that the finances is right. You can kind of really get around a lot of the other stuff, but if the finances aren't right, you will crash and burn. I recently had a client and this was a mutual client between me and Steve, where literally we've gone in to apply for the same 23 unit building twice, and both times their finances haven't been right. You have to have your finances right. And so I'm, and then this is, you know, the second time around, me, you know, going completely hard on them about what does the finances look like, and are you guys solvent in order to be able to get through this, so I can not only manage, you know, if this is a good use of not only the nonprofit's time in being able to get this done, but is it a good use of my time? And then I got to work, and then I got to bother some not so fun brokers on the other side.
Right.
And you know, we don't want to exhaust the deal. We don't want to exhaust our presence in the deal. So for me, that making sure that financially people are solvent enough to get from point A to point Z is really important. You know, we can, in terms of condition and repairs and all this kind of stuff, all that stuff is negotiable, but it doesn't make a difference if you can't close the deal. So, you know, again, the finances are a big deal for me.
Okay, so that's just going to be a deal killer for you when you negotiating that? Is that just?
It's a deal killer for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Not just me, for everybody. That's the problem. It's a deal killer for everybody.
Yep. And I think to piggyback on that, because financing in and of itself, especially now for commercial, where it's different than residential is for the people, the individual, let's say, who is qualified, right? Some people don't got it all together. They might even have cash, but not the ability to get financing. But let's just say you do. You got the ability to get financing, you got the cash, you're working on the organization, they got it. The property also has to have the ability to get financed, meaning that there has to be a certain level of occupancy. For instance, if the building has 20 units, and there's 7 units, or let's say 8 units vacant. So they're sitting about 60% occupancy, which means they got 40% vacant. They're not gonna, that building is not gonna be able to get financed traditionally by a bank. You probably got to go private money on that note. And the reason being is because the property itself is not performing. And so the lenders are gonna look at you, and then they're gonna look at the property. So if you're tough to finance, and the property is vacant, you got to go like a private loan. If you're great and you got millions, but the property is still underperforming, you still probably got to get that kind of loan. So financing is for sure the major concern on all different. Now, there's a lot of cash deals that's happening that I suspect also will continue to happen in commercial real estate, especially with interest rates going up, and there being so much cash out there that investors are like, I don't want all this cash, it's losing value. I want tangible assets, right? And so in the cash deal, where there is no financing, right, there's still concerns. And the concern at that point has to do with the feasibility of the property. What I mean, again, it goes back to analyzing the income expenses. Is this property producing the type of income, or does it have the potential to produce the type of income that's going to intrigue the investor to move forward? And one final thing for other types of commercial property, other types of, I would say, business purpose commercial property. So listen, you're an entrepreneur. You want to go buy a building for your business. The income and expense is not that much of a concern because you're buying it for your operations. Different purpose, right? What is a concern at that point that you may not see in residential is the environmental status. A lot of lenders are going to make you get, and even if the lender doesn't make you get, it's a good idea to get, especially for, you know, business purpose property. They're going to make you get what's called a phase 1 environmental report. And if it's anything funny on the environmental report, that will certainly not only blow that deal, but put a major black eye on the property. So just another nuance to think about in the world of commercial that is not necessarily there. You don't have to get phase 1 environmental reports on homes, but in commercial property, especially business property. And I suspect as realtors, we need to be getting a lot of our entrepreneurs in our community to be homeowners of their business, meaning that our entrepreneurs need to be owning their business. And hopefully you guys have seen that the impact of not owning your business property. How many restaurants have we seen this month that have shut down because a idiot landlord tripled the rent in the time where commercial rents are down. And then the established business that's there now has to move on because they didn't have control of that property. So that's something we as realtors and as Black folk in the community need to be getting our businesses to have an ownership of their business property. And so that concern is environmental.
Okay. So Steve, real quick. So I have a quick question, right? And based off how you answered this, I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Okay. What was the easiest transaction you ever had? Commercial transaction you ever had?
Yeah, no, you know what? One of the easier deals that I've ever done is one of the bigger deals I've ever done. Well, I've done bigger deals in size. It was a REO, 31 unit building REO. And I spotted the building. This is off 1459 MacArthur Boulevard. I actually sold that building twice. 1450 back in the day in 2011 or 2010, we tracked the building. It was easy in here. Here's why, a couple reasons why it's easy. Number one, the rest of the market didn't know about the property because the property was not fully constructed. It was 90% complete. Therefore, on the foreclosure list, for all of us in those days, when I say the market, I'm not talking about LoopNet or I'm talking about the foreclosure market because that was where it was at. All of us that were tracking it, you would only see a 10,000 square foot lot in foreclosure because on the list, that's what the property was, a 10,000 square foot lot. But driving by it every single day, you would see that it was a boarded up building. And when I did my research, I saw that, oh, it's not a 10,000 square foot lot. It's a boarded up building. I tracked the foreclosure. I tracked the bankruptcy. The day it went into foreclosure, I made an all cash offer to the bank. At that time, it was Cathay Bank. We made a direct offer to the REO broker now, REO manager. In commercial, here's another thing. When property goes REO, you actually can reach out to those people and make them offers because they would much rather do that than put it on the market. Residential, once it goes REO, they got their agents and brokers, forget about it. But in commercial, when it goes REO, you can go straight to the source. That's what I did. I came at them with a $4 million, all cash. We closed that deal in 30 days, all cash. You know what I mean? One of the easier deals I did. It was a nice commission too, but it was easy in the sense that I wasn't fighting against Alibaba and the 40 Thieves because they didn't even know about it because they only was looking at the internet. I would have my feet to the street and I seen that deal and was able to, bring it to the right person when we was tracking it because, we found a little a niche and let that be a lesson. Sometimes you gotta, all this technology is A1, it's beautiful, it's outstanding. Sometimes you gotta have your feet to the street though.
Okay, so I'm gonna pose the same question to Shawneequa Badger, and then after that, I'll ask my follow-up question.
Sorry, I was muted. My easiest commercial situation has been financial. I've been really diving deep into the finance perspective and getting into the lending side. And so and that's why I'm so excited about getting more people that look like us on the financial side, because we can really liberate people in getting people and across the country. It doesn't matter where you're at. You don't need an NMLS to get into commercial lending. But the great thing is it allows us to help construct the table. We don't have to wait for a seat at the table. So the lending side has been a real door opener for me. And I'm excited in being able to make that a door opener for everybody.
So my follow-up question to that, Steve, you mentioned that one of your bigger transactions was probably the easiest one. When somebody is getting into commercial, would it behoove them to look towards those bigger transactions, or should they start off slow and get it and start off with 5, 6, 7 units?
Well, look, there, it's levels to the game, right? You know what I mean? And when you start dealing with the bigger deals, you've got to have a language to be able to work in that space, right? You got to be able to have the backing. I was able to go after that deal because I had a client that could handle that. You know what I mean? I had to knuckle up and nickel and dime to get to that point. You know what I mean? However, like I said, my first deal as a young pump a young pup in the game, just barely 21 years old, was a 6-unit deal. So, you know, what you want to do is figure out what you want to work and then start working it. I would suggest, you know, if you're starting in commercial, going 5 to 20 units, because that gives you a comfortability. Also, let me just say, we do a lot of 2 to 4 unit deals in the office. And it's a very similar process, right? So don't be afraid to go after the big ones, but actually still be working the 2 to 4 units. What I would say is you have to map out your criteria and how you're going to prospect and how you're going to market. You can't go after everything. So dial in. And if you're just starting, you should be, especially in you're doing apartment buildings, or if you say, hey, I want office, whatever, go with the smaller intermediary stuff to begin with, and dime, so you can get your game to the point where you can do the bigger deals. However, don't let that, if one come on your lap, don't be scared, go after it. You know what I mean? But from a prospecting, from a marketing standpoint, you need to target, because you can't send a million, you can't prospect, you can't cold call everybody. You can't send a million mailers to everybody. If you're doing videos, you need to have a target. So go after your target, which should be small to intermediate properties to begin with. Once you get your game, once you level up, then you move up. But don't be scared if one coming to your desk.
Okay. Do you concur, Ms. Badger, or do you have any type of?
No, well, let me just tell you the only way that you're going to learn how to move about in the space of commercials, you got to get in there and do it. You know, you gotta, you know, you don't learn how to swim by watching everybody on the sidelines doing it. You got to get in the water. You got to dog paddle a little bit. You got to flounder a little bit. You may take on some water a little bit, but you got to get in there and do it. Many times that's the only way that you'll learn. All the books, the YouTubes, the things that we're exposed to these days are not going to be as big of an educator as experience. So you got to get in there and do it. And also understand that you have in this organization, you have resources that you can reach out to in the event that you have questions about something particular to the commercial space. I call Steve all the time. Huh, Steve?
All the time.
I call Steve all the time. You know, and we have these direct contacts, and that's the value of being here in this space. And if I can't handle something, I give it to Steve. I can't handle something with someone else, I give it to somebody else. You know, we have resources that can help you navigate through this so you don't feel like you're going at it alone.
Next question, Ms. Badger. Is there any legislation that directly contributes or hinders African Americans in securing commercial property?
You know, I think that, and Steve may be a better person to understand the history behind this. But, you know, I think that the New Deal, you know, it wasn't specific to residential, even though we look at our history of discriminatory or lack of inclusion in spaces. Anywhere that was wealth, anywhere that was real estate specific, we weren't allowed to be a part of. And so even though the Fair Housing Act is specific for residential, it did not necessarily open up the doors, and for commercial, we don't have as many pads in those spaces. But the other piece of this is, even though it's not a legislative perspective, and we probably will be identifying our own pillars in which we're going to have to be standing on to figure out what are the impacts for us as Black people in the space of real estate. Because right now, all of the NARAB's impacts are based on residential. But if you look at the impacts that they're focusing on is all finance. So guess what? If it's finance on the residential side, it's going to be finance on the commercial side. And the other piece of the puzzle is just the fact that we don't have any representation whatsoever. I think we're at 2% or 5% or even less than that of Black people that are selling or on an executive level. So when we look at all of those areas, it's very easy for there to be discriminatory practices that need to have some legislation for better protection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Peterson?
And I mean, there's a couple things. The first one, the way rent control is set up, to be honest with you guys, actually helps to spur gentrification. Let me just tell you, the cities in California that have the strictest rent control laws, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, parts of LA, even San Jose, have the biggest by far in a way amounts of gentrification happening in their areas. And those cities have the biggest loss or exodus of Black folk moving out of the city. And a lot of that directly has to do with the rent control laws in the sense of Black folk is more susceptible for tenant buyouts. When big landlords, I know several big landlords that love rent control, because what they do is they go into a building with low rents and they come by and say, hey, I got this 50 bands for you. Or you just got to give me your keys and, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000. And a lot of Black folk take that money and move out of those cities. But I'm not gonna get into rent control because that's a whole nother situation. So, something else that I think is that many people are not aware of that is a killer to Black wealth is the Dodd-Frank regulations. Has to do with the Dodd-Frank regulations that came about after the Great Recession. And this one is what I'm talking about. Many people invest in commercial real estate passively. They invest through a fund, they invest through an investment offering, because a lot of times, hey, you're doing a 100-unit building, you may not have all the cash to buy that, but you can invest with the sponsor who does, right? When these sponsors put together their investment offerings, many times these investment offerings only allow for what's called accredited investors to participate in the investment offering. What an accredited investor is someone who has $1 million net worth, or they're making $200,000 on their tax returns for the last 2 years. What happened when the Dodd-Frank regulations occurred? Check this out. They took away your qualifications of being for accredited investors. Your home equity no longer qualifies for you to, you're in the calculation for you to become what's called an accredited investor. So in other words, you would have to have $1 million of net worth outside of your home's equity in order to qualify, or be making $200,000 a year on your taxes. Now, this was supposed to be a protection, because in the great financial crisis, everybody was taking advantage of, and they were, because the system did it on purpose, bottom line. But what was supposed to be a protection is restricting many of us from being able to invest in the best quality investments, because we're not accredited investors. You can't even put, if you had $500,000 cash, but you're not accredited, you couldn't put that money in some of America's best deals. Now, that's supposed to be a protection, but it actually is restriction, because Black folks have known the value of home ownership. And that's what this organization is all about, is getting people into home ownership, and home ownership being the foundation of wealth. And it is a foundational piece to building your wealth. But now that what they've done through these Dodd-Frank regulations, if they said that your home equity don't even count. In real life, if you sell that house, you get that money, right? I mean, that's why the market's hot, right? The market went up. My neighbor sold their house for 1.6. They owed 100-something thousand on it. That was 1.5 minus the commissions that they put in their pocket, real money. But they don't even allow you to consider that as part of your calculations to be a millionaire or accredited investor. So that is truly restricting us from owning commercial real estate. That is truly restricting us from building wealth. There's ways around it, though. I'm committed to figure out those ways, but that's a problem. That's a problem.
That's great information. We appreciate that. At this time, we have about 1 minute left before we go. So I'm going to ask you both to go ahead. Let us know where we can find you, whether it be social media, YouTube, or whatnot. Ms. Shawneequa Badger, you go right ahead first, and then we have Mr. Peterson go in after that.
Well, you can find me really easy by typing in Shawneequa Badger anywhere.
I'm Googleable.
Yeah, I'm very Googleable. If you, for some reason, can't figure that out, you can look up in the city of Oakland, and I'm up in the sky in 11 locations on billboards around the city.
Yeah, I'm gonna say anywhere you riding around in the town, you can connect with Shawneequa. And she doesn't, by the way, you do the best job of marketing your brand of anybody that I know. And I just want to shout the queen out for she is literally the queen of branding and marketing. And you know, we all need to learn from that. And so for me, the best place for y'all can find me on is YouTube. Go to YouTube and put Steve Peterson or Infinity Investments. Same thing on Instagram, Steve Peterson Investments, LinkedIn. I'm saying YouTube because that's where you get me, you get all this game coming. You know what I'm saying? I'm putting this consistent content out there for you to soak on that up. If you want to book an appointment with me and talk some business, go to our website, infinityinvestments.net. But holler at your boy on YouTube. Please stay soaking this content up and deliver it and share with other people.
Before we get out of here, I want to allow my president, Miss Imani, to come on and talk about midwinter.
I want to first
This is very, very important.
yes. So thank y'all for joining us. We will be doing this every other month. This was a great start. So thank you to Mr. Steve Peterson and Shawneequa Badger, who were both long-term Realtist supporters. Like I said, Steve is our past president. Now, you love their presentation. Now that's let's take Steve and Shawneequa and multiply that by 1,000. So y'all got to come to our midwinter where you'll be able to come and not only soak up a lot of value and a lot of game, but also rub shoulders with people who look like me and you in all markets all over the nation. So our midwinter conference is happening March 1st through 4th. Another QR code, pull out your phones. This will take you to the schedule of events. We're not actually just to come. Again, there are a lot of great sessions that are planned, and actually Ms. Shawneequa Badger is on the education committee. And so she can let you know if you miss it, you'll really be missing out on some great information, and also just able to fellowship and hang out and have fun with our people. I know we go to many conferences, but if you haven't been to a Realtist, to a NARAB conference, y'all ain't really seen and really experienced all that you should yet. So I recommend that y'all join and come to the conference. We will be safely hanging out in this value in San Antonio, Texas in March.
And can I also say something else really quick, Madam President? Like, you don't want to be sitting on the sidelines forever, ladies and gentlemen. And the way that you get access to be a part of something that allows you to mobilize around Black wealth, whether it's locally or nationally, is to join the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, specifically the local chapter, which is the Associated Real Property Brokers. And in order to be a part of all of these wonderful affiliates that we have, specifically the commercial and industrial division, it may be the Young Realtist division, it could be Women's Council, could be a number of affiliates where it allows you to grow in your gifts or your niche. You have to be a part of you have to join the local chapter, which is the Associated Real Property Brokers. You know, there is no, other people would like to say that they are similar to us there, but there's nothing on the planet like being a Realtist.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I put our link in the chat, and I just put it in there again. So please go check out our website. If you are not in our email database, please feel free to add your email address so keeping you abreast of any events we have. And we are on social networks. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, ARPB, Oakland Realtist, and I'll throw that in the chat as well. And it is 12:04, and we thank everyone for joining us today. Hope y'all go around.
Mr. Wilcox, if you would mind praying us out, please.
Certainly. With all hearts and minds, prepare for prayer. Heavenly Father, We just thank you, dear Lord. Thank you for this meeting. Thank you for this wealth of information provided by Shawneequa Badger and Mr. Steve Peterson. Thank you for allowing them to obtain the gifts so they can share it with us, dear Lord. Continue to allow ARPB to share the gifts that we have to the newcomers, dear Lord. Continue to be with us. Continue to lead and guide, protect us, dear Lord. Protect our families, protect our homes, protect our health. Just continue to be with us each and every day and each and every endeavor we do in life, dear Lord. These and many more prayers we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you all for coming. We'll be in touch. Check your emails. We got events coming up next month. You guys have a nice day.
What's up, Bob?
Water leak. They have some sewage stuff going up here.
Uh-oh.
Maybe for that.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's just in between where they got the.
All right, folks, I'll at you. Solomon, give me a call, bro.